first time I noticed the room, it wasn't because of anything strange. It was because I couldn't book it. I need you to understand how boring that is, to set the tone right. I wasn't a man looking for ghosts. I was a man looking for a room with a working screen so I could run a vendor demo at 2 o'clock. And every decent room on the 14th floor was taken. And there was this one room, 14C, sitting right there on the floor map by the elevators. Frosted glass door, little nameplate, and the booking panel outside it glowing red, in use. So I went back to my desk and pulled up the calendar to see who had it and when they'd be done. And the calendar said the room was unavailable, not booked by a person, unavailable. No organizer, no title, no end time. Just a gray block stretching off the edge of the day in both directions. I figured it was a glitch. That's where I want to start because that's where I stayed for a long time, longer than I probably should have. Let me tell you who I am and where this was. I did facilities coordination for a company I'm not going to name in a 32-story office tower in downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. We had floors 12 through 19. Insurance and financial services, the kind of company whose actual product is hard to explain to your relatives at Thanksgiving. My job was the unglamorous machinery of the office. I managed the room booking system, processed maintenance tickets, coordinated with building security and the after-hours cleaning crew, handled the badge access database, ordered the coffee, dealt with the HVAC contractor when half a floor complained it was too cold and the other half complained it was too hot. I knew that building's nervous system better than anyone. I knew which badge readers were flaky, which conference room screens needed the firmware update, which floors the cleaners hit first. So when 14C wouldn't book, it was my job to figure out why, and I assumed I'd have it sorted in 20 minutes. I didn't. The room booking system we used tied into Outlook. Every conference room was a resource account, an email address basically, and when you invited the room to a meeting, it would auto-accept if it was free and decline if it wasn't. Standard corporate stuff, nothing exotic. Every room I managed showed up in the directory as a bookable resource, except 14C didn't. When I searched the resource list, it wasn't there. The room physically existed, and I could walk down the hall and put my hand on the door. But as far as the booking system's directory was concerned, there was no resource account for it. And yet the panel outside the door, the little wall-mounted tablet that shows the room's schedule, that panel was pulling a calendar from somewhere, because it showed the room as in use with that same blank gray block I'd seen on my own screen. A panel can't display a calendar that doesn't exist, so somewhere there was a calendar for 14C, it just wasn't in the system I could see. I want to be honest that my first instinct was completely mundane and a little annoyed. I figured it was an old executive room. Companies do that. Some VP wants a permanent private room and IT sets it up off book so the rank and file can't grab it, and then the VP leaves and nobody cleans up the configuration and the room sits there blocked forever, a fossil of some org chart from 3 reorgs ago. That explanation satisfied me for, I'd say, about 2 weeks. What broke it was the night I saw the light on. I stayed late one Thursday, end of a quarter, everybody buried in deadlines. By 9, the floor had mostly cleared out. The motion lights had gone down to that dim after-hours level where the building decides nobody's around, and the only sound is the HVAC hum and the little ticking of the vents. I was walking the 14th floor, doing a quick check, the kind of thing I did out of habit more than duty, and I came around the corner by the elevators and 14C had its lights on. Through the frosted glass, you couldn't see detail, just a soft glow and shapes. The privacy film turns everything into smears. But the lights were on and the room booking panel set in use, and there were shapes at the table sitting, several of them, around the long table the way people sit in a meeting. My first thought, again, was the boring one. Somebody booked it for a late call, or the cleaning crew was in there, or it was a group of analysts grinding on quarter end with the door shut. So I badged my way back to my desk, checked the calendar one more time, and the room still showed nothing but that anonymous gray block. No organizer. I checked the badge logs for the 14th floor for the last hour. This is a thing I could do, pull up every badge swipe by reader and timestamp. And in the previous hour, exactly 2 badges had hit the 14th floor readers. Mine twice, coming and going from my desk. And the cleaning supervisor's once, 20 minutes earlier, and his badge had swiped back out at the freight elevator on 12 right after, which I could also see. So according to the access control system, the only person on the 14th floor was me. I went back down the hall. The light was still on in 14C. The shapes were still at the table. And I stood outside that frosted door, and I'll tell you, I almost opened it. I had my hand on the handle. But there was something about the quality of the quiet on the other side of that glass. Not silence exactly, but a low murmur. The texture of voices without any words you could catch. The way a meeting sounds through a wall. People talking, taking turns. The cadence of a discussion. And I took my hand off the handle. I told myself it was unprofessional to barge into a meeting. That's the lie I used. Really, it was that the murmur didn't sound like it wanted to be interrupted. I went home. I told myself I'd seen a late meeting and a badge log glitch. And badge log glitches happen. Readers fail to write. The database hiccups. The next morning the room was dark. The panel said available for once, and I let it go. I should tell you about the speakerphone because that's the thing that started to chip at me for real. A few days later, I had a legitimate reason to go into 14C. A user on the floor had submitted a ticket, the only ticket I ever saw for that room, incidentally, complaining that the room's wall screen kept waking up on its own during a meeting in the room next door, the light bleeding through the glass. So I went in to check the AV, and the room was a perfectly normal conference room. Table, 10 chairs, wall screen, whiteboard with the ghost of old marker on it, and a speakerphone in the center of the table. One of those black starfish-looking units. Ordinary. Except the speakerphone was warm, not hot. Warm, the way electronics are warm when they've been powered and working. The faint heat of a device that's been in a call. I put my hand flat on it. Warm. And the little status light on it was lit. Steady, the color it shows when it's connected to a line. I picked up the handset part, the console, and there was a dial tone. And out of pure reflex, the way you do, I looked at the screen on the unit to see the last numbers it had dialed. There was a call log, a list of recent calls, all of them internal, 4-digit extensions. I knew our extension scheme. We'd migrated phone systems about a year before I started. The old 4-digit internal extensions had been retired and replaced. The numbers in that call log were all old format extensions. Dead numbers. Extensions that didn't route anywhere anymore because the system that used them had been decommissioned. And the timestamps on those calls were recent. Within the last few days. Calls placed and apparently connected, judging by the durations, to extensions that hadn't existed in over a year. I stood in that room holding a warm phone, looking at a log of calls to numbers that couldn't ring, And for the first time I felt that specific cold drop in the stomach that I'd later get very familiar with. I put the handset back. I closed the ticket as no fault found, which was a coward's move, and I left. Here's where I have to bring in Dale, because Dale's the one who told me to stop. Dale was the night security supervisor, building security, not company, employed by the property management firm that ran the tower. Heavy-set guy, mid-50s, had been in that lobby for going on 20 years, watched a dozen tenant companies come and go on those floors. We got along because facilities and security overlap constantly, badge issues, after-hours access, all that. I trusted Dale, the way you trust a man who's seen the building empty 10,000 times. I asked him casually about 14C, whether building security ever saw anything weird up there. I framed it as a booking system problem. Dale got quiet in a way I hadn't seen from him. Then he said, "You doing your floor checks? You go past that room, you don't look in twice." I asked him what that meant. He said, "First look, that's fine. You see the light, you note it, you keep walking. You go back and look in a second time, you start to see who's in there. And once you can see who's in there, the room knows you can see it, and then it puts you on the list." I asked him what list. He said he didn't know, he just knew the guys who'd had trouble were the ones who looked twice. He said there'd been a security guard years back before my time who got fixated on that room. Went in one night and Dale said, "The way you say a thing you don't fully believe but won't risk being wrong about." He didn't get fired and he didn't quit. His badge just stopped working one day, and when we called the tenant company to ask about him, they said they had no record he'd ever worked there, and his name was off the directory, like he got unhired backwards. I told Dale that sounded like a story. He agreed it did. Then he told me he'd been not looking twice at that room for 12 years, and he intended to keep it that way until his pension, and he suggested I do the same. I didn't, obviously. You don't tell a facilities guy there's a system in his building that doesn't behave and expect him to leave it alone. So I started pulling records. That's what I had instead of a Ouija board, you understand. I had access to archives, old calendar data, old directory exports, the shared drives. Our company kept everything the way big companies do, terrified of a lawsuit, so there were years of archived files, moldering on network drives nobody ever cleaned out. I started with the room itself. I went into the resource management backend, the admin side, and I found 14C. It existed in there, but it was flagged in a status I'd never seen used on any other room. Most rooms are active or decommissioned. 14C was set to something like retained, restricted, do not modify, with a configuration date going back almost 8 years, before our current system even migrated forward from the old platform with a note in the field that just said, "Per legal hold, do not delete." A legal hold, that's a real thing. When a company's involved in litigation or an investigation, legal puts a hold on relevant records so nobody can destroy them. Somebody 8 years ago had put a legal hold on a conference room's calendar and instructed that it never be deleted. And it had been faithfully carried forward through every system migration since, like a splinter the body grew around. So I went looking for what happened 8 years ago. It wasn't hard once I knew the year. 8 years back, the company had gone through what the polite internal documents called a workforce optimization, a layoff, a big one. About 400 people across the Charlotte floors, done in a single morning. The kind of thing that gets a code name and a war room and a carefully sequenced plan so that everyone gets cut at once before anybody can warn anybody. I found the planning folder on an archived shared drive, buried under access permissions that had long since stopped meaning anything because half the people in the group no longer existed. And the planning for that layoff, the meetings where they built the list of who stayed and who went, had happened in 14C. There were meeting minutes, folders of them, spreadsheets with names and columns, retain, exit, review, with little notes in the margins. The cold arithmetic of deciding who keeps their livelihood, done in a frosted glass room over a series of mornings. Catered, I'd bet, judging by the calendar invites that had survived in the archive, because they always cater the meetings where they decide to ruin people's lives. There's coffee and pastries in the room where they cut 400 jobs. And there was a name that came up more than the others, a woman. A director in HR who'd run point on the whole thing. I'll call her Maren because I'm not putting the real name in this. Maren had organized those meetings. Her name was on every invite as the organizer. And from what I could piece together from the emails, from the tone of them, she'd hated it. There were messages from her pushing back, asking for more severance, flagging people she thought were being cut for the wrong reasons, getting overruled. And then, after the layoff, a string of emails where the burnout just bleeds through, where she's working 18-hour days, handling the fallout, the appeals, the unemployment claims, the one wrongful termination suit that turned into the legal hold. And then her emails just stop. I looked Maren up in the current directory. Not there. I looked her up in the archived directories year by year, and she's there and there and there, and then 1 year she's gone. No transfer note, no farewell. Email in any folder I could find. Just present 1 year and absent the next, the way they all were. The 400 names in a column that got moved to a different column and then deleted. It took me a while and a conversation with an old-timer in HR, a woman near retirement who'd been there through all of it, to learn what happened to Maren. The HR woman didn't want to talk about it either, but she'd had 2 glasses of wine at a retirement party, and I asked the right gentle question. She said Maren had a heart attack in the office, late one night, alone, working the layoff aftermath, the stress of it. Found her the next morning. She said Maren had died in a conference room on 14, that she'd stayed late to finish reviewing exit packages and just never went home. And then the HR woman looked at me funny and said, "Why are you asking about Maren?" And I said, "No reason." And she said, "You're in facilities. You're not the first facilities person to ask me about that room." And then she wouldn't say anything else. So now I had a shape to it. A room where the company had sat and decided who to erase. A woman who'd run that process, who'd carried the weight of it, who'd died in that room with the work unfinished, exit packages still under review, and a legal hold that meant the records, the calendar, the whole apparatus of that decision could never be deleted. The company had created a process to remove people from its existence, and then it had been forbidden by its own lawyers from ever letting that process end. That's the part that I think actually matters more than any ghost. The meetings didn't stop because the company never let them stop. It put a hold on the room and walked away. And the room just kept doing the last thing it had been told to do. It kept reviewing employees. It kept deciding who stays and who goes. Forever, on a calendar nobody could open. I want to tell you it stayed academic. It didn't, because then I got the invite. It came on a Tuesday afternoon. An ordinary Outlook meeting invite popped up in my inbox with the little envelope icon. Subject line blank. Location 14-C. Organizer field empty, which Outlook isn't even supposed to allow. Every meeting has an organizer. The time was the following Tuesday, after hours, 7 in the evening. And there was an attendee list. I knew some of the names. A couple were current co-workers, people I sat near. But most of them I'd just spent 2 weeks reading about in archived spreadsheets. They were names from the layoff. People who'd been exited 8 years ago, and Maren's name was on the list as an attendee. And at the bottom of the list, my name, with a status next to it that the other names didn't have. Most of them just said, accepted, already accepted on my behalf without my doing anything. Mine said pending review. I declined the invite. You can decline a meeting. I hit decline, send response, and the meeting vanished from my calendar. And I felt, for about an hour, like I'd won something. Then I looked at the room panel on my next floor check, and the gray block was there for that Tuesday, 7 p.m. And when I hovered over it, just for a second before it cleared, the attendee count showed, and it included one more than it had before I declined. Declining hadn't removed me. It had just changed my status. I went from pending review to the word that came up was scheduled. I didn't sleep much that week. I had options. And this is the part I've turned over the most. The part I still don't know if I got right. I'm a facilities coordinator. I had admin access. I could, in theory, override the legal hold flag and delete the resource. I could have IT wipe the orphaned calendar. I could physically go into 14C and pull the speakerphone, disconnect the screen, kill the AV gear, strip the room down to a dead box. I had the means to end it. But here's what stopped me, and I want you to sit in it the way I did. That room and its frozen, endless calendar were the only place those 400 people still existed. The company had deleted them from the directory. Their emails were purged, their badges deactivated, their names scrubbed from every active system. The only record that they had ever worked there, that they had ever been people with extensions and meetings and a place to sit, was inside that held calendar, inside that room that wouldn't stop running. Maren's name was nowhere in the living company. It only existed in there, organizing a meeting that never ended. If I deleted the room, I'd be doing the last thing the company never quite managed to do. I'd be finishing the erasure. I'd be the guy who got rid of the last trace. And there was the other side. If I left it alone, it was going to keep going. And it had my name on it now, scheduled. I decided I needed to see it, not delete it, not save it, just see it. I needed to know what a meeting in that room actually was. So that Tuesday, the night of the invite, I stayed late. And at 7 o'clock, I walked down to 14C, and the light was on, and the panel said in use. And there were shapes at the table through the frosted glass. And I opened the door. I'm going to tell you exactly what was in there, because the truth is both less and more than you'd think. There was no ghost in a sheet. There was no rotting corpse at the head of the table. There was the room, the lights on, the screen glowing on the wall, and the chairs were pulled out around the table at angles, the way chairs are when people are sitting in them and leaning in. But there was nobody in the chairs. Empty chairs pulled out, arranged around a table as if occupied. And the room was full of the sound of a meeting. Not loud. That same low murmur I'd heard through the glass, except now I was inside it, and I still couldn't make out words, but I could feel the shape of it, the turn-taking, the pauses, the cadence of people discussing something serious and routine at the same time. The speakerphone in the center of the table had its light on, connected, and every so often it clicked. The soft click of a line picking up or a person being added to a call. The wall screen showed a spreadsheet, names in a column. I recognized the format. It was an exit review, names and a status column, and as I stood there, a cell updated on its own, a status changing from one value to another. And the cursor on the screen moved without a mouse. And somewhere in the murmur there was a pause, like a decision being recorded. The whiteboard had writing on it that I hadn't put there, and no one living had put there. It was an agenda. And the last line of the agenda, the last item, had a name next to it. My name. And the status column on the screen scrolled slow and found my row. And the cell next to my name was the one that said scheduled. And as I watched, the cursor moved toward it. I did the only thing that felt right, which probably wasn't smart, but I'd had a week to think about it. I didn't smash anything. I didn't pull the plug. I walked to the head of the table, to the empty chair where the organizer would sit, where I figured Maren had run those meetings and where she'd been found. And I spoke into the room. I felt ridiculous and I was shaking, but I did it. I said that the meeting was adjourned. I said the review was complete. I used the language, the corporate language, because I'd come to understand that's the only language this thing spoke. I said the workforce optimization project was closed, all exit packages approved, all reviews final, no further action required, and I said the names could be released from hold. And I said one more thing, off script, because it was the thing I actually meant. I said, looking at the empty chair, Maren, you can go home. It's done. You finished it. You can go home. The murmur stopped, not faded. It stopped all at once, the way a conference call drops when the host ends it for all. The speakerphone light went out. The screen went black, then to the standby logo, then to sleep. The motion light over the table, sensing nothing moving because nothing was, dimmed and clicked off. And the chairs, I swear this on whatever you want, the chairs slid in. Quiet, one after another. The soft roll of office casters on carpet tile, each chair pulling itself up to the table neat and squared. The way you leave a room when the meeting's really over and everyone's gone home for the night. And then it was just a dark, empty, ordinary conference room and me standing in it and the HVAC hum. The invite was gone from my calendar the next morning. The room panel showed 14C as available, and it actually let me book it. The first time the system had ever offered me the room. I didn't book it, I never booked it, but it was there in the resource list now, a normal room, available like it had finally been allowed to be just a room. I'd love to tell you that's the end, the clean version. I closed the meeting, I freed them, the room went quiet. And for a few months it was quiet. I checked. The room behaved. I started to believe I'd actually fixed something, that I'd done facilities work on the supernatural and closed the ticket for good. Then the company announced we were moving. New building a few blocks over, a shiny new tower. The old lease was up. And as facilities, I was on the planning team, which meant I saw the floor plans for the new space early, the architectural drawings, the room layouts the designers had drafted from our requirements. And I was going through the conference room schedule for our new floors, matching old rooms to new ones for the migration. And on the drawing for what would be our version of the 14th floor, there was a conference room near the elevators, frosted glass. And the architect had labeled it, pulling from a list of our existing room names that someone in our company had exported and handed over. And the label on that room, on a floor plan for a building we hadn't moved into yet, in a tower where that room had never physically existed, was 14C. I asked who'd added it. The architect said it came from the room list our office manager provided. The office manager said she'd exported the active resource list from the booking system, and when I went into the booking system to check, 14C was back to its old status. Retained, restricted, do not modify. Per legal hold, do not delete. The flag I'd never touched, that I'd thought I'd talked into letting go, was set again with the configuration date of the week we'd announced the move. The legal hold had never actually been lifted. I'd just talked the room into a quiet stretch. But the company's records still said those 400 people were under review. The hold was still in force. And so when the company picked up to move, the room came too, because you can't leave a held record behind. You have to carry it forward. They'd carry that room from building to building forever, the way they'd carried it through every system migration. A splinter. The company would never stop growing around. I quit before the move. Found another job, less money, didn't care. I never set foot in the new building. I told myself I was done, that I'd closed my chapter of it. That whatever happened in 14C in the new tower was somebody else's ticket now. That was about a year ago. Last Tuesday, working from home at my new job, my new laptop, my new company, nothing to do with the old one. An Outlook notification slid up in the corner of my screen. I get 100 of those a day. I almost didn't look, but the subject line was blank, and the location field said 14-C, and there was no organizer. And when I opened it, the attendee list had names I didn't know from a company I don't work for, and at the bottom, under all of them, was my name. Status: pending review. I haven't declined it. I learned that lesson. Declining just changes your status. I've left it sitting in my calendar unanswered because as long as it says pending, the meeting hasn't started, and I've come to understand that the worst thing that can happen isn't being reviewed. The worst thing is when the status changes to scheduled, and then after that, when the little notification finally slides up in the corner, some quiet evening when I'm home alone and think I've gotten away from it, and it says, the way it says for every meeting, in that cheerful, neutral corporate font, meeting started.